This is the meeting of the Millis Select Board for January 11th, 2021. And we have a regular Select Board meeting, which is the first one of calendar year 2021. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jim McCaffrey, Chair of the Board. Joining me are Pete Germain, who is our clerk, our Vice Chair, and Aaron Underhill, who's the clerk of the board. Also, Mike Kaczynski, the town administrator, and Karen Beret, our operations manager. There will be some other featured players as we go through the evening. But I did want to introduce the core members of the team from the select board. So the first order of business is any informal announcements that people would like to make. I have nothing tonight, but is there any other member of any of my colleagues would like to make any kind of an announcement?
I do not. Thank you.
So with that, I think what we'll do is we will go to the first item on our agenda tonight, which is an important one, as we've been doing almost at least once a month and sometimes twice a month, asking our public health director and members of the Board of Health to join us to talk a little bit about the COVID issues relating to what's actually happening in the town of Millis. And tonight, in particular, we would like them to give the residents of our town some a local update on plans for vaccination for COVID. So, and any other items that the board or the public health director feels as though they'd like to share with the town tonight. So, with that said, I think what I will do is I will ask John McVeigh, who is our Director of Public Health, to take the floor. John.
Well, thank you, Chair McCaffrey. It's been a rough few months, as unfortunately expected. The cases really in Massachusetts and across the U.S., the globe, have gone up quite a bit. It's very difficult for cities and towns to stay out of the red, and Millis is no exception in that regard. We have the public health nurses and volunteers doing contact tracing, and they're doing a great job. There's an awful lot of work involved in that area, so we definitely want to make sure that we give accolades to the nurses and the volunteers that are working in that direction. That being said, obviously, unfortunately, we're in the red, but we're not alone in that regard. Vaccines, which is the big issue, has come up, and it goes into 3 phases: phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 we're actually in right now, and that's divided into some categories. And originally healthcare workers, frontline healthcare workers, and now we're involved with first responders, which we do have a clinic coming up in the near future, very near future, for first responders. And, that's important that people get their vaccinations in that direction, since they're, considered frontline people, and that's just handling potential patients and so forth, and people that may be positive. The good news is that we have a vaccine. Right now, we've got actually 2 vaccines. We have, right now, we're using the Moderna vaccine, which is a 2-dose vaccine, as opposed to the Pfizer, which is a little bit more complicated. And hopefully in the future, it gets even simpler. We have a 1-dose vaccine, and the temperature requirements are a little bit easier. The logistics become easier. I don't have to tell anyone that, the vaccinations for phase 2 and phase 3 become logistically very challenging. Phase 2, which is slated for sometime in February through April, which is for 75 and older, high risk, 2 comorbidities, teachers, sanitation, public health and public works people, adults 65 and older. It goes down the list, and I think you can see that on the chart here as depicted. Phase 3, which is the general population, April to June, it's again for the general population, as it's stated. and that should be a 2 to 3 month endeavor. Again, what the allocation is to the town and how they develop this vaccine plan to states, we still do not know. You know, how many go to the pharmacies, how many go to primary care, how many go to hospitals, regions, and what the towns are allocated and what they can logistically handle is right now we have to determine those numbers, and the state has to give us those numbers. So, but you know, the good news is that it's here, and it'll be rolling out in increments all the way through the early summer, and hopefully by June or July we should all be vaccinated and get this scourge behind us. That's all I have to say.
John, can you just again, I want to make sure folks understand sort of the role of the Commonwealth, the state, and the state health department, and your role at the local level. I guess from the point of view of the local Department of Health, we're doing all we can. We can't work miracles because we're dependent on folks up the food chain, so to speak. So again, can you just emphasize again the responsibility of the Commonwealth to help with the allocation out in the local level?
Yeah, they have to determine the numbers and the need that exists at the local level in relative to what they expect is going to be given up, like different avenues, i.e. primary care, pharmacies, and other avenues, similar to the flu clinic, if you model the flu clinic, and what could potentially, resemble that. Although COVID is going to be different in that, it's more of an extensive vaccination campaign, and the logistics are far more complicated in my mind. But once we get information from the state, is to and they'll tell you you've got to get information from the federal government as far as allocating the Moderna vaccine out at certain times. Then they'll be able to tell us what we can expect and when we can expect it. But I'm not saying we're completely in the dark, but we don't have the information available to us to make any concrete decisions or, say for sure what kind of numbers we're looking at the local level as far as clinics go.
Okay, great.
Can I add some information?
Sure, Kathy.
I just want the public to understand some of the logistics related to this issue. For example, we are doing a combined first responders clinic with Bellingham, Medway, Franklin, Milford, and Millis. So 5 towns. Of those 5 towns, the only town that was able to receive vaccine was Millis. And I think that points to the fact that most health departments have not been hiring public health nurses. The only reason that we were able to receive vaccine is thanks to the wisdom of the town. We did have a public health nurse, and we have been running flu clinics more than 20 years. So there's definitely, in the state, there's going to be some staffing issues if you look at those 4 other towns that don't even have a nurse. The other big logistical issue, and the reason why we're not doing it in Millis, is COVID spacing. So if you're going to run a vaccine clinic, you want to vaccinate at least 200 people in a day. That requires distancing for the registration, for the vaccine stations, and most importantly, for the fact that people have to sit, remain, and be watched for 15 minutes. We literally couldn't do it in Millis because our biggest space, the school, isn't big enough to meet that requirement. So I just want to emphasize there's more logistics to this than I think sometimes is presented to the public. We just can't get vaccine. They will only give 200 doses. You can't do less, which is why we just didn't do a clinic just for Millis first responders. And there's other logistics related to managing the vaccine. but I think it's a little bigger issue than just getting shots in people's arms. And I just want to make that clear, in that, of the 5 towns, we were the only town that was actually able to get the vaccine for this first round. So that's to the credit of the town.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're sharing that with us, because it's important for us to do everything we can, as you say, to make sure that the residents of Millis understand what challenges we face, as well as the solutions that we're developing. And to the extent that we've been able to do some things because we have the staff, that's also to the tribute of the community, which has been willing to approve budgets that have allowed us to do this, and also, frankly, some help, I think, from the CARES Act, which has enabled us to do some things, then we've done it, so that's important. But obviously, there's a long way to go, that's for sure. Any other comments from either my colleagues or anyone else? Okay, well, we'll move on, and I'd like to just, what John had to say.
Just a quick comment.
Let me just finish. To thank everyone in that, our Board of Health, for all the work you're doing. Again, having the resources is a tremendous benefit to us, and having the dedicated resources like we have is also a tribute to the hard work of folks in the office, and we appreciate that. Mr. Tremaine.
Sorry, I couldn't get my unmute button to unmute. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I've had reason to get in touch with both Kathleen and John, and they've been very helpful. And all I can suggest to people is, if you have questions, if you have any concerns, anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch with them. They can be very helpful to helping you resolve whatever the issue might be.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll take a pause for those struggling with their mute button. That's okay, because I actually exited the meeting during, you may have noticed, I disappeared. In any event, thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next item of our agenda, which is the appointment of an Enterprise Funds Advisory Committee member. I think, Karen, you have the material. Can you just share with us the material and what's happening?
Bear with me. Oh, for the Enterprise Funds Committee. Do you want me to speak to it, or do you want to see it?
No, put it up and speak to it, because we want people to understand what we're, what it is.
Let me share the screen. Okay, hold on one moment. So for the Enterprise Committee, the board recently decided to add yet another voting member. Hold on, if I can come through to this here, which is one of the Board of Health members. And, sorry, struggling to find my packet here. And Jaikur LeBlanc, who is one of the members of the Board of Health, has offered to step up and become the latest voting member. The charter was changed to include another voting member from the Board of Health recently.
Great, thank you.
That helps much, but.
So we've expanded the membership, voting membership, and we have a member of the Board of Health who is willing to step forward and participate. That's terrific. We appreciate those efforts. Any questions, comments from my colleagues on the board? This is a board appointment, so I would ask if we had a motion to move forward with this nominee.
I move that we appoint Jaikur LeBlanc to the Enterprise Funds Advisory Committee.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the board approve the appointment of Jaikur LeBlanc as a voting member of the Enterprise Funds Advisory Committee representing the Board of Health. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
That motion is carried unanimously. And again, thank you for stepping forward. I'm sure that you understand that the group's already up and running. It's working hard. There's a lot of issues on the table. And it's a good idea and a great idea that the Board of Health came forward and said they thought that they should get directly involved beyond just having the public health director as a member. member. So I think that was a good idea, and I'm glad we've been able to move quickly to make that appointment. Okay, next item on our agenda, we have two items actually, which are appointments for the Dulles Police Department. Good evening. Is the chief there? You're there.
Good evening. Thank you. I come before the board tonight with two recommendations for appointments. I just want to let the board and the town know that both appointments come at, it won't cost the town anything for the training for these two individuals due to a grant that we secured through state 911. We recently got that a couple weeks ago in the amount of $37,000 for training. The first recommendation I'd like to make is for Ms. Colby Zatoli. Ms. Zatoli has been a dispatcher with the police department since 2018. She's been an outstanding member of the department. She's shown herself to be dedicated to the department, and we hope to have her for a long time to come. Since she's been working as a dispatcher, she took it upon herself to put herself through the part-time police academy. It would be my recommendation to appoint Ms. Colby Zatoli as a reserve police officer for the town of Millis. By doing so, she'll be able to augment and help fill road jobs within our community.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So this is with respect to the reserve officer. Now, this is a position that's part of the planned budget, and at this point, there's no cost for training. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I'm very happy to see this recommendation coming to us, particularly from someone who has been working in the department already. So again, as the chief has pointed out to us many times, as important as anything is the initial appointments, because people come and work in various roles, various jobs, whether it's dispatch or reserve officer or part-time officer, gives us the opportunity to evaluate them as potential police officers for our town, and gives the candidate the opportunity to assess their fit in the Millis Police Department. So I'll ask my colleagues on the board if you have any questions regarding this recommendation.
I don't have any questions. I would like to make a comment.
Certainly.
I've actually worked with Colby on numerous occasions at the police department. She's been excellent. She's responsive. She's responsible. She's very clear in the way she presents herself. And so I think she's a valuable asset to the police department.
So having worked with Mr. Germain, she's still interested in.
Well, you can never tell. Hey, the chief is still there too. What can I say?
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, upon the recommendation of the Chief of Police, I do request that the board ratify my appointment of Colby Zatoli as a reserve officer for the Millis Police Department.
And this would be subject to completing the physical, drug screen, and psychological exam, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So I would take a motion to approve the town administrator's appointment of Colby Zatoli.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that the board's move to complete the town administrator's recommendation for Colby Zatoli to become the reserve police officer for the town of Millis, subject to completion of physical, drug screen, and psychological exam.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded for the board to approve the town administrator's appointment of Colby Zatoli as a reserve officer in the Millis Police Department, subject to completion of the physical, drug screen, and psychological exam. Is there any further discussion? So I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
And that motion is carried unanimously. Congratulations to Colby. We have another appointment, Chief Sapphire.
Yes, sir. The next appointment would be for a part-time dispatcher. If I may, just to trail on what you touched on earlier, I want to thank the town for appointing all the various members over the last few years. That's really set a tone within the police department in terms of retention. Years ago, not to get too into it, but years ago, Millis was more of a training ground where people would get trained and then they would leave immediately to go elsewhere. And we've done a great job of retaining our employees because we've worked them through the system, starting from dispatch, in the police officers, in the part-time police officers. So it's a real incentive for the people that do join the department because they see that's how it works. And we've got some real quality employees out of the process. So I thank you for that. The part-time dispatch position is to supplement a couple positions that we had lost. Those folks got promoted up to full-time. And part-time dispatch is extremely important within the police department because it allows our full-timers to get time off, and it offsets the overtime quite a bit within the police department. So my next appointment would be for Ms. Riley Brown. Currently, she is enrolled in the criminal justice program at Merrimack College, and in the summer, she is a reserve officer in York Beach, Maine. She is a resident of Canton. She'll be back here in the next month, within the month, and she'll definitely be able to supplement our desk as well as moving forward within the police department in the future as well. There is very minimal training with Ms. Brown. She will come into the department with all her 911 certifications as well as emergency medical dispatch. So all we have to do is get her familiarized with how we operate within the building. Again, that familiarization is covered through the grant, so it's no cost to the town. I would ask the board to consider the appointment of Ms. Riley Brown. Upon the board's approval, she'll have to complete a physical and drug screen as well.
Okay. Certainly she has a long history already for a young person of service in a variety of police and police-related activities, whether it's in York, Maine, also seems to work for the police department at Merrimack College, Canton Police Department. So she's had quite a bit of experience already. She also has quite an impressive record of things that she has accomplished from E911 all down the line. And as you get, I guess, with I don't know, the younger employees, they seem to know all the Microsoft stuff too. She doesn't know Munis, but it's probably not a requirement. Anyway, looks like a very well-qualified candidate. So I ask the members of the board if they have any questions they'd like to address to the chief.
No questions, thank you.
No questions. Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kaczynski.
upon the recommendation of the Chief of Police, I'm asking the board to ratify my appointment of Riley Brown as a part-time public safety dispatcher for the town of Millis, with the conditions of a completed physical and a drug screen.
So I take a motion to approve the town administrator's appointment.
I move that we ratify the town administrator's appointment of Riley Brown as a part-time public safety dispatcher pending a drug screen and physical.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded for the board to approve the town administrator's appointment of Riley Brown as a part-time public safety dispatcher, subject to completion of the drug screen and physical. So I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
That motion is carried unanimously. But Chief, thank you very much for bringing forth the candidates, and it goes without saying that since we have you here, we're also going to take this opportunity to thank the police department for all the work that's been done behind the scenes and in front of the scenes on helping our community get through this COVID crisis. We don't know the half of what your team is doing every day right out there on the line, risking themselves. Hopefully we're pretty close to getting the vaccination out to our police and firefighters, so hopefully that will be helpful as well. But it goes without saying it. We all get a gratitude to you, then the Millis Police Department, as well as the fire department and the EMT service. So thank you very much for all that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Germain.
I'd also like to make another comment. We talk frequently in town about our costs and bringing on extra people and the burden and so on. I think it's important to point out that, as the chief noted in this, he's received grants. He's gone after them. He's received them to offset those costs. So it's very important for us as a town to be looking at these departments. I know that Chief Barrett and Chief Sapphire regularly go out and solicit for the grants, but they've been particularly effective in this area. And the net of that is it represents hundreds of thousands of dollars to the town that we do not have to come up with and we can therefore use for other things. So I just want to bring that to the attention of the committee and the town.
Thank you very much. Point well taken. Okay. That being said, we can now move on to the next item on our agenda. This is a request for some time before our board from the Conservation Commission regarding an issue relating to one of the Concom's properties, 72 Pleasant Street, known in local lore as the Verderber property. So I don't know if the chair of the Concom is on with us.
I am here, Mr. Chairman.
Very nice.
We can hear you.
So I'm Jim Lutterer. I'm the chair of the Mills Conservation Commission. And as we all know, we had a lot of storm damage in Millis. And unfortunately, at this property, I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but it's the Verderber Farm, and it's a nice open space. There's hiking trails there, but in particular, there's a three-sided kind of Adirondack shed that is used by Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and people that want to get out of the rain that are visiting the property. And during the storm, a large pine tree was topped and unfortunately landed right in the middle of the shot here, as you can see. There's more pictures, but the reason I'm here before you is that the Mills Conservation Commission does not have a particular budget for maintenance of the properties. We just oversee the protection of the properties. So Camille, who's our secretary, indicated that we needed to come to you to request funds to get this tree removed and chipped. After the storm, in addition, we walked, everyone on the Conservation Commission walked all the properties that had hiking trails to inspect for other damage. And fortunately, there was only damage to this property. There's also another very large tree that fell across one of the hiking trails that we'd like to at least get chopped out and then pushed aside so that people can hike on the trail at the Verderber Farm. Now, unfortunately, I don't have quotes in front of me, and I understand that we need to post for quotes to get this work done. the Oak Grove Farm shared with me the quotes that they got from 3 other tree services. So my intent is to contact those tree services and maybe another one that I'm familiar with, just to get a dollar amount that it's going to cost to at least remove this tree. The structure we've talked about, it would probably make a very good project for the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or any other organization, but we're not asking for funds to repair the structure there, because I guess we've already asked and it's really not covered under insurance. So if you have any questions about this or any other information you'd like, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Okay, I'll start some of the discussion. I just want to further clarify, and maybe the town administrator can also clarify this. I was led to believe, and maybe I got this wrong, that with respect to the Oak Grove farmhouse, storm-related damage to the farmhouse was in fact covered by our insurance. It was the trees and whatnot going down that was not covered. Now, is this therefore, this particular structure is not considered town-owned building, or I'm a little confused as to why this would not have some sort of insurance coverage?
Mr. Chairman, I can try to answer that. The Oak Grove Farm building is listed with our insurance company and fully covered. This particular structure is a simple lean-to in the woods, was not covered under the town's insurance because of the nature of the building it is. Therefore, it is not covered under our insurance. And to the best of my knowledge, it never has been. Simply because it's a simple structure. It's not something of a level that's usually covered by a town's building insurance. And of course, the same thing would go here as far as the trees. Our insurance company never covers the removal of trees from a property, except to the extent that they're moved away from a structure to allow for the repair of the structure. And again, this particular lean-to was not listed on the town's insurance program.
Okay, so obviously the trees are never going to be covered, but is this a situation where the next time we renew, assuming this thing gets rebuilt, that it ought to be listed, or is it the kind of property that they wouldn't cover anyway?
We can certainly, once the lean-to is the structure is put back in a good condition, we can certainly check with our insurer to see if this can be added to the town's list of buildings for coverage. Usually we have a $2,500 deductible on our insurance. So no matter, if the structure, say, is whatever this is, a $7,000 structure, or the first $2,500 would not be covered.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that to make sure I understood why this was not part of there wasn't some availability of insurance coverage. Other questions from colleagues on the board?
I have some comments.
Underhill?
We live on Pleasant Street, so we've gone to this property a great deal. We too saw the damage and were aware of the large tree down in the path. It's a shame because it is a basic structure. It's, again, like a 3-sided shed. There was a picnic table inside it. It had looked like somebody had recently done work to it to improve it right before we had this storm, which is very unfortunate. The property's beautiful. It definitely is obviously worth taking care of these issues. My question specifically is in terms of liability. If we, as a town, obviously we need to remove the tree, but if the plan isn't to fix the structure after that, is there something that do we need to knock it down? Is there some kind of requirement for safety. I mean, we go there with our children. We certainly don't let them in it, but you know, I don't know that other people would do the same. So.
I think that's a great comment. But I think that the priority is to first get rid of the trees, like you mentioned. But we actually hadn't considered the concern about having the structure fall on someone if they crawl in there. So we'll probably have to make that judgment when they take the tree off of it. Or maybe we can see if we can find someone to actually demolish the lean-to as well and start from scratch. It's possible that there's salvageable wood. I would think so. And as the Conservation Commission did discuss, trying to open it up to either try to raise money so that the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts could get together and build something there, or it would be a great project for another organization. But as I said, we don't have a budget for this, so I guess we'll leave it up to you on what you want to do here.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Germain?
I have personally no problem with the concept of removing the tree and making the structure safe, at least in the present condition of some sort. I would ask, and maybe I missed this, though I was listening, what the cost estimate is for the tree removal and what the cost estimate would be for materials to replace the existing structure.
So I will start working on getting some quotes out. I'm not sure of the procedure, but I'm sure Camille Stanley will help us with that. And so we can take care of the trees, but we can also, I guess we can also talk amongst ourselves to get an idea about what it would cost to rebuild the structure. We did talk about that, but we really haven't moved on that at this point. But I am concerned about it falling down on someone, so I hadn't thought about that.
Well, once the issue is certainly articulated, then it becomes really incumbent upon us to take a position, us meaning the community, the town. And so I'm also of the view that because this is a town-owned land, the town administration ought to have a role or take the lead in gathering quotes to determine who is qualified to do this work, and then come back to the board and report on that. I mean, I think the Conservation Commission has done the work of getting out there and identifying the problem. I think it's the administration and this board's responsibility to work with them to solve the problem, not just to, let me be positive. I think it's incumbent upon the town administrator and the office to take a look at this problem, which has been defined by the Conservation Commission as the stewards of this property, and develop a quote or whatever, assuming the board wants to do that, for what it would cost, A, to remove the trees, and B, to address the problem with potential safety hazard for the building. I don't know if my colleagues agree with that or not, but I think that's what we ought to do.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Germain?
That's the minimum. We have to include in that the cost of hauling material away from the area, and potentially roping it off or somehow cordoning it off until the area can be made safe, so that we don't have the chance of anybody getting hurt as a result of playing around in it until this is fully repaired.
Well, I'm trying to co-opt the work by the Conservation Commission. I think, though, that they've done their work. They brought it to our attention, and we should be able to work with them to come up with a plan to make us have a solution. Now, it's going to cost money. How much money, we don't know. And where we would get the money is another thing we don't know. But unless we have a concrete plan, I think that we need to work on that from the town administrator's point of view, or the town administration. And again, I don't know if the chair of the Concom disagrees with that or not, but I think we need to work together, because we did learn in working through the issues with the Oak Grove Farm, it was much more effective if we could work with the Oak Grove Farm Commission and the town administrator's office, come up with getting the right quotes, meeting all the procurement requirements, and then presenting the solution most likely to the finance committee as well as the board, because this, again, might require a reserve fund transfer to fund it. So, Mr. Kaczynski, you have any comments on that, or?
Mr. Chairman, I definitely feel that that's probably the best approach. If it's the board's desire to seek a reserve fund transfer from the finance committee to remove the down trees from the lean-to and from the pathway, and to remove any debris from the building, we can certainly do that as a phase one. And then if the board wants to discuss whether it be now or later, whether there's any appropriation for any materials or anything else in regards to the lean-to, you can decide that as well. So if the board would like to move ahead, I can certainly work with Camille and the Conservation Commission to take the next steps to get some concrete quotes and then seek the funding to do all the work.
Mr. Chairman and Select Board, speaking on behalf of the Conservation Commission, we wholeheartedly support this. I think that's the most efficient way to move forward, and we will be available at any time to help with this process.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon us to work with you to help spec out the deed, which you've done, and then ask you to take a look at whatever specs we put in, and then make sure that we get this done in a way that is consistent with what the Conservation Commission is looking to accomplish. So that's what I would like to do. And I think that this is to the board. I don't think we need to really take a vote on this, but I think the sense of the board is to ask the town administrator to work with the Conservation Commission and and Camille, the staff, to put this together so that we can have a specific proposal to make. And we ought to, as part of this, I think, identify the two projects. One's the trees and the other's the building. So I think we should do both. And if we can't do them all at once, certainly if we can get those trees moved, it would be helpful. If the chair of the Conservation Commission doesn't mind, I'd like to take advantage of you being here for another question.
Sure.
This is a broader question about the responsibility and the hard work of the Conservation Commission in managing many acres of open space and open land and recreation land. And I guess without putting you on the spot, if you care to comment just in general about what the Commission's view is on the kind of commitment, and I'm talking about financial commitment, this community should be making, not only to acquire and own property, but to try and make sure that it is kept in such a state that it can continue to be used, whether it's for passive use, for trails, for recreational use. I think we've gotten certainly to a point where there's quite a bit of property out there. And what we've learned this year, just in speaking with the Oak Grove Farm Commission, how difficult it is for them, I think probably the same issues apply to the Conservation Commission. And if you'd rather come back with the answer, that's fine. But I'd like to have the conversation start to begin tonight if we could.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we've been talking about that at many of our last meetings. Right now, we're in the process of actually organizing a list of properties, which we do have. And some of us have gone hiking and going through the properties to see what shape they're in, to get an idea of, the trail markings and things like that. Some of us have gotten lost while hiking. and that. But you're absolutely right. We have some beautiful properties that really need some maintenance. So I think that's great that you brought this up, and you know, without a specific budget for maintenance of trails and things like that, obviously it's difficult for us. I know that Oak Grove Farm has their own working budget for maintenance, but it sounds like they're also having trouble. I didn't know that. So I think it's really important that the town maintains the open spaces, and that at least the trails are maintained. We've been extremely fortunate that over the years, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have come to us and have taken on projects to mark trails, to actually fix up areas, to make bat houses, things like that, to really kind of augment the property. So I think it's really important that we, or at least maybe there's a way we can figure out how to raise funds from the open space committee to support some of this work for the conservation lands.
Well, I agree with you. I'm not looking to say that, you know, suddenly we're going to have a, you know, substantial budget. Oak Grove has a budget, but I'm sure that everyone understands that much of what we see on Oak Grove is the result of, you know, sweat equity by the Oak Grove Farm Commission members,
Right.
as well. You pointed out, whether it's the Scouts or whomever, who have done the same for conservation land in town. And it's really a partnership. And at some level, I think the community needs to sort of step up a little bit, but it's part of the partnership. Now, we're not going to do this overnight, but, you know, over the years, the town has literally spent millions of dollars acquiring property, and it's beautiful property, and it's something that we cherish, and we've had the good fortune and foresight to buy the properties. Now, perhaps it's time to augment that a bit more by working with the Conservation Commission to see if we can develop a little bit more broadly a plan to do some maintenance and upgrading, if you will. I don't know what we might be able to do through this budget cycle, Mr. Kaczynski, but and it's not late in the budget cycle, but it is. And I'm not trying to create a lot of work for everybody, but this is clearly an area where we should do some thinking to help the community maintain the properties and enjoy them even more. So,
Well, if you would like, we have new members on the commission that are really quite enthusiastic about this exact issue, and we could join your meeting from time to time and go through some of our ideas, and at least show you the properties and things like that. That might help a lot. And then, yeah, I think that's really we'll have this as an open agenda item every month at our meeting, so we can discuss this.
well, okay, I think that'd be a great idea, and I don't want to downplay the contribution of the veterans too, right?
Yeah.
It is good to have some new blood now on that to help, regenerate some enthusiasm. So
Right.
I think I look forward to working together on this, because I think it's important for this board to try to continue to highlight what's going on, as we do with other boards and committees. But I think it'd be a great idea if we could do on our end a little bit more work to help promote what's happening in the area of the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Hear from us. How about that?
What's that?
You will hear from us.
Oh, that sounds good. We're ready.
So it's heard from you, right?
Okay, we'll and we'll be ready. I'll let Camille know what transpired here, and she'll be ready to interact with the town administrator.
Perfect. Before we let you go, is there any comments then from my colleagues on the board? Any thoughts that you have with respect to this idea of trying to just get a little bit more comprehensive in our overview?
Yes. I completely agree. I think it's a great idea. I think it's important. I only discovered this particular property this past year. So it's been lovely during the pandemic to go take a hike, and the trails are manageable for somebody with 3 small children. So it's a great property and a nice escape, and it's inspired me to try to find others that we have in Millis, because it seems to be a pretty well kept secret somehow, but it's really a great area. So I fully support, intervening to fix the building in the trees in this case, to at least make sure it's safe and passable. And I'd welcome involvement with future projects for these spaces.
Great. Thank you.
I'll second exactly what's been said. I think it's terrific property, and we need to maintain that.
Very good. Okay, thank you, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to highlight to the community not only the problem here, but the opportunity. So we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda. We're a couple minutes early. I don't know if Attorney Sandman is on. Has he joined us?
I am not sure if he has. Karen, do you see him?
It doesn't say Sandman. I'm not sure who this is. I don't know. I don't see it specifically, but that doesn't mean he's not here.
Okay, well, I don't hear him at all, so
No.
we are early.
You could go to
Maybe.
GTE.
Pardon me?
I said you could move on to GTE.
Well, I'm going to do item 21-10010.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
So, item 21-010 is a request for the board to take a look at and approve the GTE Millis LLC application for a marijuana cultivator license. That's Mr. Gazinski's item. Mr. Gazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you had mentioned in the board's packet, there's a standard certificate of local compliance related to the licensing process from the Cannabis Control Commission for GTE. I can state to the board that GTE has completed all the necessary local requirements in order for this document to be approved and signed by the board. And I recommend that the Select Board vote to approve this certification and authorize the chair to execute the document and then return that to the Cannabis Control Commission. This is similar or pretty much the same document in format that you received for the other cannabis businesses that have gotten approvals from the board to this point.
Okay. So we have the right to comment, respond. If we don't respond, then they just move forward. I would like.
I'm sorry, yes, this is automatically approved in 60 days if the board takes no action.
Okay, so I will comment. Certainly, we have worked with the Millis LLC in the development of their cultivator license for the property on Route 109. The board and the public will recall that we have signed a host community agreement with the proprietors of the business. They're moving forward. Not quite sure what the status is on the planning board and whatnot, but they are moving forward with the project or the approval prospects. And now this Cannabis Control Commission gives us the opportunity to comment, particularly if we find that they have not complied with local requirements. In this case, they have complied with all local requirements, including the HCA and the contribution that they made already, signing of the HCA. So I think that personally I would favor the board approving offering its approval to this application. Comments from the board?
I agree. I would also offer approval. It sounds like, though, we're just verbally doing this, right? We don't need to make a motion to do anything, right?
No, I think we will make a motion because we're going to have someone sign it.
Oh, okay.
The chair of the board to sign the document, so we would do it through a formal vote.
Okay.
And I would say likewise, they've met all the conditions, so I would make a motion to approve their application for marijuana cultivator license as proposed and as reviewed herein.
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded for the select board to approve the request, the application for GTE, I get the name right.
GTE Millis LLC.
Application for marijuana cultivator's license. Mr. Kaczynski, do we need somebody to sign this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think historically the chair of the board has signed this.
Okay, so I did amend the motion to authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the board. So it's been moved and seconded for the board to approve and authorize the chair to sign on the town's behalf for this application for GTE LLC. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
and that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now we are at 7:30. Has the attorney signed in at this point or not?
He has. It looks like he maybe just stepped away for a second because I'm seeing a photograph in the background, but he is on.
Okay.
There he is.
Excellent.
Hi, Mr. Sandman.
Hi, everybody. How are you tonight?
Good.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How's your meeting going so far?
It's as usual, it's brilliant.
Yes.
Thinking big thoughts and taking big action. But seriously, we're delighted to have you with us this evening. You're here to talk to us about some issues relating to PFAS litigation, I believe, an issue that is, pretty important here in our town as well as in communities all over the place. But we look forward to having the conversation with you tonight. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, it is a big issue, and I see that it's, in looking into this further, it's a big issue for Millis. I see that you have some readings that are causing you some concern, and it is a national issue as well. I'm familiar with Millis and Mike. We represented you, as you probably recall, in opioid litigation. Excuse me. We do represent you in opioid litigation, but we represented you in MTBE litigation and secured for the town $900,000. You'll recall MTBE is a contaminant that was leached into public water supplies and contaminated them and had to be removed and treated. I don't recall exactly what Millis needed to do with regard to funds they received. Hopefully it went toward other improving water quality. The opioid litigation we're also part of. We represent 120 communities in Massachusetts. Millis is one of those. This is litigation against the manufacturers of opioid products, the distributors who distributed improperly, and the retailers. And that's moving through the system pretty well. There will likely be a settlement with regard to the large distributors announced maybe by the end of this month. It's basically already concluded. It just needs certain approval. So I will save, I won't go beyond that. Opioid, we'll save opioid for another time and MTBE for another time. Let's talk about PFAS. The problem with PFAS is it's used widely in a variety of applications. What we're particularly interested in speaking to you about tonight is PFAS, PFOS and PFAS, that were used in AFFF, which is aqueous fire foam. And this is used at airports, and it is used at fire training facilities to extinguish fires that often have oil and gas. Fire training facilities are often done at local airports. we believe that your contamination came via Fort Devens. And the reason we think that is we represent air presently, and we represent a number of individuals whose private wells have been contaminated, who live in Harvard, and we're hopefully going to have Harvard sign on as well. The way these cases are working is they're getting filed in federal courts around the country, and they're getting consolidated, not in a class action, but consolidated in a multi-district litigation. And what that is, it allows for common issues to be dealt with, such as discovery and documents. The primary manufacturer of PFOS is 3M. The thinking is, why have multiple depositions against 3M? Why have, throughout the country, why should there be review of the same documents over and over again? So these cases are consolidated in an MDL court in South Carolina. Spearheading that effort is a very close friend and someone that has led the way in a lot of litigations involving water, and that's Scott Summey from Barron & Budd in Dallas. And Scott is the co-lead counsel in this litigation as well, and he led the charge with us in MTBE litigation, which, by the way, that was 90 cities and towns in Massachusetts. So I think these cases, this makes sense. All these cases are handled on a contingency fee basis. You don't pay anything. We put up any costs. We'll get them back at the end if we're successful. If we're not successful, that's the end of it. I believe we will be successful. You'll have an opportunity as part of a fee agreement if you wanted to drop out for any reason, if it became too burdensome. That's often a question. I really don't think it will be. If you ask water personnel in Millis, I think you'll find that MTBE was not burdensome for the town, and I don't think PFAS litigation would be burdensome as well. And the hope is that after all of the analysis happens with documents, and after there are possibly some bellwether trials, those are trials that the court might choose, it won't be Millis, but the court might choose to sample trials to vet some of the issues, flush them out. And the thinking is that following that, there could be a very good opportunity to resolve all cases nationwide. I have no idea what they're worth at the moment. I have really no idea if we'll be successful, other than smarter lawyers than I have entered this litigation and entered other litigations, and usually don't get involved in litigations like this unless there's a reasonably good chance of success. We believe we have some documents already from 3M that shows of the knowledge of the dangers of PFAS. To give you an idea, there are certain cancers, and this was sent to you, by the way. I sent to Mike a while back a letter with certain attachments to it, including a fact sheet. There are various cancers, including reproductive issues, increased cholesterol, liver damage, immune system, and considered carcinogens. It's called, PFAS is considered a forever chemical. The PFAS chemicals are considered forever chemicals, and the reason is that you really can't get rid of them. Their half-life just doesn't allow them to ultimately dissipate. They stay in the groundwater. And because the groundwater doesn't have a lot of air and flushing out, they stay there. They remain there over long periods of time. So usually the response is treatment. Sometimes it's a new treatment plant. Sometimes it is using carbon filtration and other avenues to filter the water. Now I see that I believe Millis applied for a grant that I don't know if that was denied or not. What I read, I think it was at least preliminarily denied to address this problem. So hopefully this would address, this would be another avenue to address your concerns. So I'm jumping around some. I'm happy to answer questions and try to stop at this point. And I think time best spent is to respond to your questions.
Very good. Yes, I mean, we do have a situation right now where we as you know, and in some of the materials, we've had some readings, test readings on wells 1 and 2, which create a potential problem for us. We are trying to address them. We're trying to stay ahead of it. We've done work really before we were required to do it in order to monitor the quality of our groundwater. So it's an issue of some importance to us, certainly. Not only getting our arms around it, but costs associated with mitigating this contaminant are very important to us. So I would ask my colleagues if they have questions. Mr. Germain, if you have some issues you'd like to raise with Attorney Sandman.
Well, I just have some questions based on some comments that Mr. Sandman made. One would be, if we join the suit, under what conditions do we determine that, in fact, the contaminants came from these foams or other things? How do we determine that we, in fact, are subject to that? In other words, I can understand if we're at an airport or near a testing facility or something, we may have contaminants. Certainly we have them. But how do we contend that those contaminants are as a result of something? Are you able to help us with that?
Absolutely. We just in my preliminary review, it really appears that you were contaminated through Fort Devens. Fort Devens had a significant problem with AFFF, and surrounding communities of yours, Air, Harvard, and some of the private well owners in Harvard have all experienced some significant problems. So the presumption, just right off the bat, is that your contamination happened via some kind of fire foam activity. The other thing is the contamination, the way it's so, what's the word I want? Not centralized, but the way it is so concentrated in these communities that are near Fort Devens would also argue for that likelihood. And finally, what would happen, by the way, is we file something in federal court. It'll get transferred to the MDL. The reality is it's going to sit there for a little while because Millis will not be a lead case. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll flush out the various issues that these cases present. But at some point, we'll probably be hiring a hydrogeologist, other experts to determine what the likely association is. If at some point we determine that it's not related to AFFF, then we'll speak to you about that, and probably there might be other avenues to pursue, but not necessarily this multi-district litigation, which is really limited to AFFF. So I feel confident that it is related to AFFF. We're going to verify that, and it's going to be something along those lines will be required, I'm sure, before the defendants will pay, although I can tell you that in other litigations, if there's enough evidence of contamination in various communities, very often the defendants will reach some kind of global resolution without the need to go a whole lot deeper. And that's kind of what happened with MTBE, and we think it could happen here as well. I don't know if I've answered your question correctly, but
my follow-up on that is we're probably, 40 miles from Fort Devens.
Mm-hmm.
So I have maybe there's some groundwater that goes between the two, but I think that's a little problematic. Don't get me wrong. I would be very happy to find that there is some recourse for this to help the community. That's my preference. But I also have to be realistic. And when I look at something like Fort Devens, which happens to be one of the places I trained, to find that there is leaching taking from Fort Devens all the way down to Millis, I think would be problematic. I can understand Air, Harvard, and those surrounding communities. There were times when I wondered if we were going to hit them with mortar shells firing, but that's a whole different issue. Assuming we go forward on this, what other communities around us are likely to be participating in this process, which would then make it perhaps a more solid case?
Well, to answer that part of it first, I do have some other comments. We are just learning. The problem is that there's no requirement for testing for these chemicals. There might be. I know the state standard has been reduced from 70 parts per trillion to 20 parts per trillion. And there's discussion over that this will be required testing in the future. Our belief is that after testing occurs, we're going to see a lot more cases. To respond to the issue of whether this is in fact related to a Fort Devens release, we suspect it's that. We're not proving any case yet. We have good faith basis to do that. Water can travel long distances underground. There's a whole aquifer world down there that gives surprising results sometimes. We're seeing it in pockets around the country, and even though it can be found in Teflon products and sometimes near manufacturing locations, the reality is it really does seem to be we're able to associate it to some kind of fire training connection. We represent Barnstable. Well, Barnstable has an airport, so it's a little closer. That's a pretty significant problem. We represent Bellingham. We have letters and discussions out to many places, but many haven't tested yet. So to answer the question as to who else will be involved, I think we'll find in coming weeks. I think my recommendation is to join because I don't see the downside of it. I see it seems like Mills has been very proactive in the steps you've taken so far. And I think this would just be one more thing to join a litigation, to try to get to the bottom of it, to have experts look into the cause of it, and to get compensation potentially down the line. And again, if it doesn't, it hasn't cost you anything. And if it does, then yes, you're heroes for doing it.
Thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
I had kind of similar questions to Pete. Isn't it now required for testing?
If it is, then it's just started.
Oh, okay.
I knew that's been on an agenda. COVID has delayed some things, so I don't know if it's required yet. But it's going to be, and we're going to see tens, so much more of a problem nationwide than we do right now.
Legally, obviously, I'm not an attorney or a lawyer, and I have no knowledge of, if there are any concerns to joining something like this. So I'm definitely going to defer to my colleagues for some of that. But sure. Certainly if it's possible that a place like Devens could have impacted us, then it would probably be wise to be in on this. But, echoing Pete, it is quite a distance. So.
Well, just another point is that, yes, we'll figure out what the source is, but the mere fact that you have it in your water and it is caused by it was manufactured by these defendants, I foresee an opportunity for compensation to a national resolution to anybody that's got it in. 3M made it. And 3M, we have evidence of knowledge on 3M's part of its dangers. So it might get to the point, particularly for smaller communities. You're smaller compared to many of the larger places around the country. It may come to a point that if you can show evidence that you have the chemical just by itself without going through the process of the source, you may be paid. I think there's a reasonable opportunity for that. Because the defendants, even if you test, they don't necessarily, they might want to test themselves, and they might look at thousands of communities around the country and say, let's resolve this by paying people that have these chemicals. If they can prove they've got chemicals, we may come and test again. We might have our experts take a look at your data, but I'm not sure they're going to dig deeper than that. They might, and if so, we have the experts to do that. But they can't. They're not going to be able to do it on every case. So,
Thank you.
and again, the opportunity in the fee agreement, which was it's just very much the same as the opioid one that you've signed, and the MTB one. It's been tweaked a little bit here and there, but it's essentially the same. It's based on a 25% fee. Based on a gross fee, and there is language in there because some communities wanted it. I think there was a concern, there's going to be a big burden to us. I don't see it. But if you found that at some point, you can say, we've just changed our minds. Or there's something, you find, for instance, and I don't think this would happen, that these were inaccurate readings. The lab was compromised. And so therefore, the readings that you have are not accurate. Otherwise, I don't see a real reason not to do it.
Okay, let me ask a couple of questions as well, because I want to understand the basis for the liability. Assuming, for the sake of argument, that we have PFAS in our water.
Mm-hmm.
We've tested for it repeatedly, and to my colleague's point, we're being required by the DEP to take action because we have exceeded the much reduced standard of 20 parts per trillion. So now I don't think anybody's going to disprove that we have it. So let's just, for the sake of argument, we have plenty of evidence that there's PFAS, or whatever the right term is, a contaminant in the water that is being drawn by wells 1 and 2. So that's a fact. As I understand the basis of the litigation, it's not for Devon's. It's the fact that the chemical that was being utilized out there, whatever it is, for fire retardant, was what caused the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
We could have a location in this town where that fire retardant was used.
Absolutely. And as I said, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I think I understand the basis here. It's not that we have to prove that it came from Devon's, but that, in fact, the PFAS came from somehow the application of this chemical manufactured by 3M. Now, maybe we don't have to even do that, but that seems to me to be the issue. Is that right, or?
Yes. We, as we sit here right now, there's a reasonable chance, and there's a presumption almost in my mind, that it was Devon's. If we learn that you have a fire training facility right in town, then that presumption probably will be shifted to that location. But I don't know of that yet because we haven't investigated that yet.
We don't have a training.
We don't bring a case against Fort Devens. The case is against the manufacturers. And you asked about why is what's the evidence? Well, in the 70s, 3M did tests and it showed the adverse effects of PFAS and PFOA, and they showed they were toxic and persistent and had health effects. So it's knowledge. It's all about warnings. Companies are allowed to use products that we might consider dangerous. Under your kitchen sink might be ammonia. What makes ammonia or rat poison or something, what makes those products allowed to be put into the stream of commerce? It's the fact that they put a warning on them. And they say, keep away from children and hide it, and big skull and crossbones, etc. When a company doesn't that's where they get into trouble. Tobacco companies use that as an example. Why did tobacco? There are no good cases against tobacco companies today for new smokers. Why? Because there were warnings on the pack. You were told that this could be dangerous to your health and be addictive and could cause lung cancer. But way back when, they didn't warn. They knew, but they didn't warn, and that's what caused their liability. And that's here is what's going to cause the liability on the manufacturers, 3M particularly.
Okay. Now, my next question really relates to the burden to the community. Now, you're going to do legal work, but you're going to want something to support that. So what is it that you need our community to produce to support litigation as it relates to us? Because that's really the work we'll have to do,
Sure.
if any.
Good question. Initially, I think it'll be, I don't know for how long you've tested for these chemicals. I don't know if it's how far back. I've got data that go back to just a few years, not much more than that. We'll want to answer something called the plaintiff fact sheet.
Yep.
And that is early discovery in the case that courts have ordered to give to the defendants. They're not interrogatories, no depositions. That could come later if this case is teed up for trial. Again, I don't see that happening. I think there are too many other cases way ahead of this case that probably already have been identified as bellwether cases. So initially, I think it's nothing more than answering providing any test results and what you're doing, maybe what your costs have been because of this, shutting down wells, where you're getting your water, what are you doing regarding filtration. I think the questions will be similar to those. The fact sheet, we work with you on the fact sheet. There's a little back and forth that goes on. I can tell you on the opioid fact sheets, and we have to work on that with personnel from Millis as well. It takes a couple of hours generally, and it would be maybe someone like Mike or someone that he designates. They might ask some financial questions. What's your budget? What's your how many people do you serve? What's your water budget? What filtration do you presently use? Do you have the presence of any other chemicals in your water? And that's where your water department will come in to provide those. Again, I don't think it's overly burdensome.
I'm just trying to get at what it is. Okay, so, I think the water department is very active.
Yes.
Monitoring and testing. And, we do hire outside engineers to help us. But I guess I would ask Mr. Kaczynski or Mr. McKay, if he's on, what is the point of view from the administration as to the potential work we'd have to do? Because in terms of the legal work, there's no lifting on our part. We have to sign, but that's not a big deal.
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly defer to the DPW director if he has any specific comments, but from my perspective and the experience I've had with similar types of litigation, that it's certainly well worth the efforts required, and I think it's certainly a win-win for the town, and I would strongly recommend the board go ahead and endorse this and sign on to the consolidated litigation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Germain.
One quick question. PFAS is actually a combination of many chemicals. You're looking at one or two very specific ones. Do we know if any of those are actually present in our town?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
Yeah, I have readings if you need them. But yes.
I just didn't want to find out that, we agree, we've got PFAS, but we don't have any of those specific chemicals. So
That's the first thing we did, and we get our info through DEP,
okay,
and pretty much updated.
thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't believe you. If you look on our website, all our testing results for the past year for PFAS are on the website. The PFOS and the PFOA are our highest readings in both our wells, 1, 2, 3. We have PFAS in every one of our wells, all 6 of our wells. And with our early sign-on with the DEP, with early testing, we were very lucky that they came out and they actually tested the site. And I have to update the board on this, and I think we need to have town council. They've already cited an area in Millis for PFAS, for the PFOS. They know where it is. They've already cited it. They've already made the site known. That report just came out this afternoon at around 10:30, 11 o'clock when Mary June punchily called me. So I think that, to get into a discussion, I think that we have a great avenue for us now to go and look for some of these funds for the testing that we've done so far, for future testing. We're putting in our wells 1 and 2 are already offline because it's already over the 20 parts per trillion. We already have some shut down. They've been off since September of last year. And the other wells that are out there, all the other wells that are producing, they're below the level of the 20 parts per trillion. We do have one well that's teetering along that. That's our well number 3. That's around the last testing. We do test that once a month. And the idea of that, it's coming down the road. It's already the regulations already been out there. It's in effect. I have our yearly testing scheduled from the DEP that we get sent every year, and PFAS is already on there. It's already on our testing schedule. We test wells 3 this year all the way straight through, and then starting next year, they have a schedule for all the different other wells on when we have to test for them quarterly. Most of the others are all quarterly because they're below the 10 parts per trillion. So anything that's over 10 parts per trillion, you test that once a month, and anything that has PFAS present, you have to test all those other wells quarterly. And we're already in that schedule. That regulation's already come out. I think we're in a better spot than we were last week when we did not know, and the DEP did all that testing that you stated that you would hire a firm. They had a firm come out, and I believe it's Michael, was it Roax from California? They had a company came out and did the testing. I just don't want to, give the name out yet. I mean, it's public. There's an email that was out there. The board hasn't seen this yet. I updated the town administrator this morning about this, and the Board of Health was notified about it through an email. We haven't received the written letter. There's many suggestions that the DEP gave me today that we need to talk, with our own town council about first. Last week when I saw, when I read this, and actually, I think you initially sent the letter to me and I sent it to Mike because I didn't feel it was my place to enter any of this conversation. So I did forward it to the town administrator. I agree with the town administrator that this is a win-win. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't still, jump on this, but our biggest source right now is our wells 1 and 2. It's offline. It's got to get back online. We cannot operate with this system, with our system, with these 2 wells offline. It's going into the spring and summer, and those wells are our major producing wells. We've already seen severe, restrictions on the water system. We haven't had a water main break in 3 years. And in the past, I'd say since this has been offline, we had 4 or 5. It's like every other week we have a water main break. And it's because the system is changing because of the 2 producing wells are offline. So again, I agree with the town administrator. I cannot see this as being a bad thing for us because it's not costing us anything. And as you stated, we can opt out at any time. But right now we're in a good shape. We're better off than we were last week at this time with the report and the sighting of one of a major, and it was for fire protection. You were absolutely correct. They identified it. They know where the fire was. They know what the foam was used, and it's all in the report that I'm sure the town knows. distribute to them.
Right, so yeah, take a look at that, but I guess that just reinforces my observation that if it's the chemical is the source of this, and 3M is the manufacturer of it, we have probably a pretty strong case as participants in this and any other litigation to show that this is what's causing our problem.
The
Attorney Sanders would like to just observe on that. I think that you're finding here there's a fair amount of interest in our community to get this resolved, and I think we may be in a position to provide very strong information to support this claim.
which is terrific. Anytime we can get information directly from the client, that's very helpful. I just want to emphasize that the litigation that's going on in the multi-district litigation consolidation is really based on AFFF fire foam. So we're looking for a fire foam source primarily. It doesn't mean that there is not potentially a case against 3M if it's not fire foam. But our concentration is going to be on fire foam, and any resolution will probably be a fire foam resolution. I have a question about your water. I know you've shut down wells 1 and 2. Have you needed to supplement outside of Millis for your water needs? Have you had to buy water, for instance, from anybody?
No.
You're fortunate.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We understand that.
Yeah.
But as Mr. McKay indicates, if this keeps going to other wells, that creates a different problem for us.
Yes.
But our general position in, based upon the fact that we sit on top of some pretty robust aquifers, is supply is not a problem. Now, it hasn't been a problem on quality either, because of all the work that's been done by our Department of Public Works and others to make sure that we've got good quality water and good quality standards and whatever we have to do to keep it running that way with filters and whatnot. But this is new for us. Not that the chemical's new, it's just that the need to respond is new, and we want to respond to it. I mean, this is a whole different issue then. And this is my last question because we're running out of time here, would be with respect to, and you mentioned it a little bit, private wells. Private wells in our community, which may also have been affected by this. Does this litigation, is this pretty much the water systems in the municipalities, or does it impact on private well owners?
I might be the only lawyer so far that's concentrated on in addition, also starting to concentrate on private well owners, particularly, but I'm not doing that until I'm really sure of the source. Okay. So I'm sure of the source in Harvard. So what we did in the summer, we sent out test kits, we dropped them off, we waited for their water to run a little bit, they filled them up, they brought them back, we sent them out to a lab, and based on those results, those complaints are getting filed shortly. It's a consolidated, there'll be about 7 or 8 people filed in one case. I want to do the same thing in Barnstable, and I'm more than open for doing the same thing in Millis. But I would first want to feel very confident about the source of the contamination.
Okay.
I have one more question. I don't want to hold you up any longer. Other than the reference to MTBE, are there other chemicals? You said your waters, you've got great quantity. Your water is in good shape. It's clean. Anything else of concern? Arsenic, for instance, or any low levels of anything else that require filtration or concern?
Well, wells 1 and 2 has an air stripper, and I think that's what that was
excellent.
Yep. And part of our design will be when we address the PFAS at wells 1 and 2, we will eliminate the air stripper, and we will put some sort of a system in that will be able to save the money on the electricity and all that of the air stripper.
Do you draw from any surface water? It's all well water. Okay.
It's a groundwater system.
Okay, well, at this point, I think that the recommendation has been for us to go forward with this. I wonder if I'm assuming there's some kind of joinder agreement or what have you.
Yes.
That we would be looking to sign. I think that we can either authorize that tonight, or we can have you put it together, and then we can vote on the agreement itself when it's ready. Mr. Kaczynski, what would you prefer to recommend to the board?
I would think it would probably make sense if we receive the draft agreement and had it on a future selectmen's meeting. Perhaps, I don't know if it could be ready as soon as 2 weeks, but I would ask Attorney Sandman if that's possible, and maybe just have our town council just take a quick look at it as well prior to your next meeting.
I'll send it to you, Mike, if it's okay. You'll have it tomorrow. And again, it's going to be very consistent with what you've seen and the other litigations you've been involved in.
Well, why don't we do it that way? And if you get it to us, well, then we can put it on our agenda for the 25th and approve signature, and then we can move forward, because I think generally it's hard to see any downside to this. I mean, at this point, we're in a good position, I think, to participate in this, but we'll see.
Sounds great. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, good luck.
Thank you.
Bye now.
All right, so we will, I'll ask Karen, you can put that back on the agenda for the 25th, and hopefully the item would be approval of the agreement between the town and the law firm to move forward in this litigation. I believe it's multi-district litigation. He kept saying MDL, but I think I got it. Okay. Next item on our agenda is a request from the South End Farm Trust to use the groundwater monitoring program for South End Farm. Is Mr. American on with us tonight?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. American, if you can present to the board what the request here is. We do have information. Karen, if you can.
I'll throw a plan up, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you want to put it on?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'll turn it over to Mr. American.
Good evening. Dan American, Legacy Engineering, here on behalf of the South End Farm Trust, which is an association of homeowners that comprise all the property in South End Farm. South End Farm, for those of you who don't know, is a subdivision off of Orchard Street, right near the town line with Sherburne. It's going to be 49 lots, probably close to 38, 39 of those lots have been developed to date. And this approval goes back to 2007 territory. And as I think some may know, there's a drinking water well here at the edge of South End Pond, which is kind of off the page, the bottom right. So as part of this approval, the town wanted a groundwater monitoring program in place for the subdivision. Now, at the time, we felt that was, I don't know, maybe excessive. It's not something, to my knowledge, that's ever been done before in the town of Millis.
Why don't we call it robust?
It's robust, yes.
Rather than excessive. Thank you.
Okay, good term. Ellen is with me this evening.
I know that. And her cat is also here.
Her cat is here, yes. She did agree to do it, just to make sure that everyone was comfortable with the project, and it has turned out to be a beautiful project for the town. And we've been doing testing on this for the last 12 years, since 2008. And during the design, we had a hydrogeologist who did extensive groundwater modeling, and which demonstrated that there would be no adverse impact to the town's drinking water supply. And the testing that we've done over the last 12 years bears that out. And at this point, the developer is not responsible for this groundwater monitoring program. The homeowners association is. So the people who own the 49 lots are responsible to fund this, and it's a costly endeavor. Ellen is, in her role as the developer, has spent at least $75,000, maybe approaching $100,000 on groundwater monitoring since this subdivision was started. And if you look at the original plan, it would need to go on for another probably 3 years or so, which would cost at least $40,000. And from our perspective, it's not necessary. It's a waste of funds. It's a waste of these tax dollars' money to go ahead and do that. We have, years and years of test results that demonstrate that this project is not harming the town's drinking water supply. So that's the nature of the request. We did have our hydrogeologist provide you with a summary report, just to summarize all the different test results. The testing regime is comprehensive: nitrates, VOCs, bacteria, herbicides, pesticides. It covers a whole gambit of substances. There are 7 test wells throughout the subdivision, and those all get tested periodically. So here now, on behalf of the trust, which is the group of homeowners, not the developer, we're asking that the board allow this groundwater mining program to come to an end.
Okay. Okay, anybody else like to address it, and then I'll ask the board members if they have questions. I have a question. I'll start with, just for purposes of sort of situating this here. You said that there are about 38 lots that are already approved or construction is completed. That means there's 10 to go, roughly.
Yeah, where are those? The lots that are outstanding are 19 and 20. This is Juana Rosenfeld's homestead. One is passed now. They are about to demolish that homestead. So 19 and 20 are going to be developed shortly. 32 and 34 have been the home to a rather large loam pile for many years. Those 2 lots, that loam pile has been relocated. Those 2 lots are going to be developed very shortly. Aside from that, all these other lots along Beach Street are developed.
Right.
Those are the lots closest to the town's well. The remaining lots that are out there's that lot 37 was bought by the owner of lot 44 and is not going to be developed for the foreseeable future. They bought it for privacy. And then there are these lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8, which are about to be started. I'm working for all the people who are developing those lots, and those are all going to start construction within the next 3 or 4 months. So we really are nearing the end of the project.
Right. Well, as I understand, part of the original rationale is while we would have monitoring going on.
Pardon?
While construction was going on, it wasn't just the houses there, but it was the fact that they were being built. So we were monitoring the water, both for the fact that the homes were there and the homes were being developed. But at this point, and that's kind of what was stated in the material you forwarded to us, but at this point, most of the construction is over or completed.
That's right. And the remaining work is really very far away from the town's well.
As far away, that's what I was trying to get at, the geography of it. Okay.
Yeah, this is a big hill right here.
Yep. Questions from my colleagues on the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Germain.
I just want to be absolutely clear on this. This is strictly testing for potential contaminants to the town water system. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's nothing else that we are testing for or are required to test for or that we feel is necessary to test for?
No, the groundwater testing program was designed to measure impacts to the town's drinking water supply.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand that. So what we're looking at here is, do we continue the testing? I'm not an engineer that could look at this and say, okay, you still got a few homes that are going to be built near the ponds, but nothing to date has shown that disturbance of the earth in those areas has contributed to any contaminants. So basically, your report comes back to say, if we don't continue testing, they don't see any potential threat to contamination of our public water supply system.
Yeah, we never did, to be honest with you. We did this as a belt and suspenders, just to make sure everyone was okay with the development going.
I'm just stating these so that I can get clarification and that anybody who's listening can understand that that's what the whole purpose was. Because, to be honest, this is new to me, but I just want the clarification is all. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes, just a couple of questions. So this isn't something that is typically done with developments then? This is a very special circumstance, and it was only because there's a well so close?
Even though it's become a beautiful project, those of you who were paying attention 12, 13 years ago, this was a very controversial project with the neighbors. So there were a lot of upset people around the project during the time of the original permitting, and I'm not aware of a groundwater monitoring program of this magnitude being imposed on any other division in the town. So it was, we had provided an analysis that this was not going to impact the town's drinking water supply, and this was basically just to prove that was true, and we've done that.
Okay, and just one other question. So currently the homeowners association, which would be all the folks that have a property in the development, are the ones that are paying for this at this time?
Correct. So Ellen is the trustee of the trust, and the trust is responsible for all of the maintenance and monitoring obligations associated with the original permitting at this juncture.
Yeah, but let me add something. I paid this out of pocket. I've never added this in the however many years. I charge $100 for each homeowner a year. This has come out of my pocket since day one. I've never put this on the homeowners. It's too much. It's ridiculous. And I knew it would end at some point, so anywho.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And ask then Mr. Kaczynski, Mr. McKay, any thoughts on this from the point of view of this is an issue of the protection of the municipal water supply. I mean, that's what this is all about. So, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I would defer this to Mr. McKay or a member of the Board of Health or the Health Director if they have any comments in regards to this.
I can start, Mr. Chairman. This predated my time on the planning board. This was like a couple of meetings got signed off right before I was a member of the planning board. And it also, the decision, I was not aware of any of this, even because at the time I was not the Director of Public Works. This went directly to the Director of Public Works and the Town Administrator. So this came to someone brought this to my attention, one of the neighbors brought this to my attention back around 2017 when the last round of testing was done. So I did as much research. No, actually, it just came several months ago, the testing of this and the question of what. So I did research. I did call Dan up, and Dan supplied me with all the information that you see here and even more information of the testing. Kathy Lannon, who has been here forever, remembers all of it, and she was very much aware of the testing and the testing schedule and the needs or non-needs of this testing. We had a lengthy discussion with the Board of Health Director, Kathy, myself, last week and months ago when this first request came up. And we've started to research, we've started looking at, the well number 4 that Dan was talking about, because there is some testing required in that area. And if you read the decision, like Ellen did state, this is going to go away. I mean, and even if you look at the percentages of the homes you could actually file under some of the percentages of homes being built where Dan pointed out were in the general vicinity. Dan stated that, 5 lots, I have been in touch with the 5, whether it's the family development or private contractors, on the other lots that Dan spoke about, that they're going to, start developing. I have been in touch with them actually within the last 2 to 3 weeks about that, where spring is coming forward. So Kathy and myself, we came to the request, and we would ask the board that we would do one more round of testing where it wasn't done in the last time it was tested, I believe it was 2017, 2018. Is that correct, Dan?
Correct.
That we would ask to look at one more testing in the spring, because that's where it requires, and it's better, in the spring when you get the runoff, if we ever get snow in the runoff. And I think that we would, not that we're against, stopping the testing, but I think you'd be in a better case if we look at one more round of testing where it hasn't been done in 3 years, and that would be our recommendation. Kathy couldn't make it. I think John's here, or he was here, but that would be our recommendation.
Okay, with other testing regimens and other developers, we do have our engineer take a look at the test results to give us an independent review. Would that be GCG or?
I mean, no, if that's required, I would ask Ali Paran to take a look at them. Ali's a local, and he's more involved in water and, testing like that.
Well, I guess that, at least from my perspective, that's a reasonable request to have one more round reviewed by our engineer, and then, assuming that there's no contamination found, that this would sunset, that we would remove this requirement. Is that
fine with that? Yes, that's reasonable.
Okay.
So that would be done in April.
Okay. That would be the spring, yes. March does not count as the spring, just April. But don't do it on April 1st, please.
We have a scheduled. There's a scheduled time period in the program for the spring round of testing, so we'll follow that standard.
All right. Does that meet with the request? Meet with approval by my colleagues?
It does for me.
Yes, it sounds reasonable.
That would be. We won't take a vote on it, but I mean, if you can comply with that, let's make sure that we. Well, maybe we should vote on it because it makes it a little bit more certain. We can make a motion. I can make a motion that the board requests one final round of testing on the South End Farm project, and subject to the approval of the town's engineer. As long as on those results, we would go along with a sunset provision for this testing requirement.
I'll second that with respect to the groundwater monitoring program of Southside Farm.
So it's been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
That motion is carried unanimously. So again, thank you for your patience. I think that that's a reasonable outcome for everybody concerned.
Thank you very much, and we'll get that report put together, and I'll submit it to the town administrator and the board as soon as it's done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda, we actually have 2 items. We are fairly close to being on time. 2 items that are going to be, where the conversation will be led by Mr. Weiss, and also Mr. McKay on the first one. The first one is with response to the a letter relating to the Gateway local. It's the 43 project on 232 to 248 Main Street. So we have a draft of a letter put together by Mr. Weiss with respect to comments made to, I'll get it in a minute, the Division of Housing Development at the state level. So I guess what I would like, at least for purposes of introducing the conversation, if we could have Mr. Weiss sort of present the draft, the content of the draft, the points, so that we could have a discussion on it. on the screen, or whether we just have a conversation.
It's up to you.
It's a letter, so it's hard to follow on the screen. But you can put it up, and then at least it's relevant.
I'll share. Bear with me while I find it. Oops. What's going on? There we go. Oh, I just saw it. Almost there. There it is. Hold on.
Okay. So, Mr. Weiss.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Weiss, I'm the Town Economic Development Director and Planner. And Mr. I'm really not opposing this project, as the letter states. My objection to the project is that the poor logistics that are brought about by choosing this particular location, logistics including transportation for the tenants, water and sewer capacity, which Mr. McKay will address, and just plain inconvenience to a decent, healthy family lifestyle. The project is simply, again, while I'm not objecting to having this project here, it is simply a decent design, but it's in the wrong location. What I'd like to do with this discussion really conclude tonight's discussion with a solution to what we can express to DHCD. And I'd like to find perhaps a number of units to suggest developing as opposed to the 48, or find a course of action that we can take to determine the number of units. If we can say only that we require a water and sewer engineering peer review, that would be fine. So I'd like to begin a process of determining how to make this project fit in this location. And that's really it. And my feeling is that I've opposed it it's not opposed it, but suggested a mitigation in the number of units as the town's planner for a few reasons. Again, the transportation situation, the distance it is from convenience stores, from grocery stores, etc., and the fact that it's really not connected to any other neighborhood in the town. But DHCD is not going to look at those. Those really aren't very legitimate reasons to stop a project or to mitigate the project. The basic reason is that we really feel that there is some question as to whether the town has capacity in terms of water and in terms of sewer. And for that, I'd like to have a discussion about saying to DHCD, we'd like to reduce the number of units in this project, or at least have some sort of, as I said, some sort of peer review, to determine that number.
Okay. Just a couple of comments to kick off the conversation. I understand the issue of water and sewer, but the letter also raises some requests, I guess, relative to what I would consider to be public safety, that have been raised by the police chief and the fire chief regarding, traffic flow, speed, crossing the street, some additional road markings. So it's a little bit more than simply, I don't mean simply, beyond the water and sewer issues, there are some other issues relating to how we would want to see this project if it were to go forward, address some of the, the issues around, traffic speed and pedestrian traffic, because it's certainly in a stretch of the road where people have been known to proceed at a rapid pace, and there's a lot of traffic in the mornings and in the evenings that use that road. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that there's another component to this we might want to talk about, which is the things that have been raised by our public safety officials as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chief Sophia mentioned the line of sight when you're heading west on 109 as you approach Dwight Street. But also, is also a problem. And we have had, we did have a fatal accident in the area. A couple of them were, most recent one about a year ago. I do mention that in the letter.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. McKay, do you have comments that you'd like to also share with us with respect to the water and sewer issue here?
Briefly, I mean, at the last meeting, I came in there with much dismay, and after the last time we met, there was a lot discussed that could go on for both the water and the sewer. And until those get finalized, I think that, it has to be an issue. I mean, the sewer capacity, I still think is a big issue. I personally don't think it's there. It's not on. It's not there on paper. It may be there in factual use or whatever. But I think that we can. We're looking through our committee. We're looking to rectify that problem to make that solution go away. The water issue. Mr. American, when he spoke about it. So what my idea is, we need to plan. We need to get something in writing. That some of the things that were discussed for water and sewer in that last discussion, when you approve the letter to go in, it has to be finalized before it goes to the zoning board. Because if it goes to the zoning board, we could lose, our place on this.
So, I guess then I come back then to what the recommendation of the board is that we, we have already endorsed the program on this particular LIP, and that some of it was certainly after lengthy discussions, certainly after understanding some of the risks here, also trying to balance what our actual ability to influence this is, that we're potentially have more ability to affect the project if we are supportive. It's a friendly 43B as opposed to not. So some of that is all sort of intertwined here in this conversation. If the recommendation then would be that we would seek to state, because of all these reasons, that it would be beneficial to this community to reduce the number of units, I think, if it's appropriate, we should say that more directly. I don't think we're in a position of saying we think it would be better to locate it somewhere else, because that, I don't see how that gets us anywhere, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, if somebody came to us with a proposal and it was at a different place, we would certainly be more enthusiastic about it. And we had one, much smaller one on Main Street that we worked with, and then the developer backed out for whatever reasons, much closer to the center of town, which in some ways, well, it was a different project on a much smaller scale. So I'd ask my colleagues if, to give me their thoughts, share our thoughts here, because I think that our administrators here are looking for us to give them some guidance so that we can put this letter together and get it in so it gets actively considered as part of the process.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Germain.
I think we discussed this in some depth last meeting.
Yeah, we did.
Particularly with respect to water and sewer. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Marican and Mr. McKay and perhaps some others agreed that they would look at this and come back at least with a recognition of what the real issues, if any, are and how we can deal with those issues. I haven't seen any of that. I'm not prepared to make any decisions on it. But I'd like to know more about that as to are the existing facilities capable of handling the load that is likely to come in here. But the second part of it has to do with safety. I don't disagree that there's heavy traffic there. The question in my mind is, if we were to request that crosswalks and safety signals were put in, is that something that the builder or a builder in conjunction with the town, and to be honest, I don't know the details of how that works, is willing to do? In terms of potentially reducing the number of units, I'm not sure that reducing the number of units changes anything all that significantly, other than maybe it doesn't make the project financially feasible for the builder, and that's something I really want to understand. So, if one would come back and say, well, and I'll just take a hypothetical number, 36 units is much more feasible under these conditions than 48. Well, that may be, I can't answer that, but what I would be interested in is that going to affect the builder's profitability to the point where the builder says, well, then I can't do it. I don't like to be in the position where we're discouraging things like this, and I also recognize that there are limits that we have to deal with, because LIP projects are going to get certain types of certification whether we like it or not. It would be nice to be a part of it. And I think it's important for us to be a party to it. So I think as I look at the whole of what's being presented here, on the safety side, it appears to me that with proper coordination with the powers that be, whether they be police, fire, or what have you, that can be dealt with. And I'm hopeful Mr. Marican can answer some of this for me. On the sewer water, again, I think I need to hear, I particularly, but I suspect the board does too, wants to hear what you and Mr. McKay or anyone else have come up with that would satisfy the concerns that were raised so that the project could move forward. I am going to voice one other concern that I have, which cannot and should not be taken up at this meeting, and that is that we as a town really should be looking into putting some kind of policy together as to how we deal with 40B projects, so that we have going forward some roadmap for ourselves and for others. But that's a different discussion issue. So that's where I look at it at the moment.
Okay, Mr. Weiss or Mr. McKay, any thoughts on this? Or
Yes, I can just close out with the water and sewer aspect of it. We have not had those discussions yet, and I'm sure they will be coming down the road. And once we get that, I mean, the only good thing in this project, the developer for the subdivision off of Main Street has come in, and I believe he's filed his, intent with the planning board, and that would upsize the sewer station, which would be able to handle this. So that's good news right there. That takes some of my, not fear away, but it was just, that station couldn't handle it, whether it be pumped off hours or whatever. If that development is going to be built, that was part of the agreement that he will upsize, and he'll be coming to the, I think that was at your last meeting, was the, I forget the name of the development, but he will upgrade that lift station. So that does take care of a lot of the, but finalizing the fees for the water, and I think that would take care of a lot of what the town needs to do to invest in its own water system, and if we agree upon that, I think it was a donation or a fee per unit, and then the tie-in fees, I think that would make, satisfactorily that the town should invest in upgrade the, maybe the water main system itself.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Underhill, you have questions?
Yes. So I think kind of piggybacking off of something that Pete had said, in thinking of this, is there a specific recommendation we're planning to make on how many units would be acceptable or suggested or supported? Or is this just a letter to say, we've supported this, but we have concerns, here's what they are, and there should be less than 48 units, and then what happens?
Well, I do think that is a question that we need to address. I mean, and I think that if what drives fewer units is either the water or the sewer, which maybe is something that can be addressed, or the public safety issues. Again, are there mitigations that the developer can be asked to provide in terms of traffic signals and whatnot? It starts to address that as well. So it doesn't lead immediately to a request for fewer units. And I get that. I agree with Mr. Germain that I don't want to make that request without having some concept of what is the economic impact of it on the developer. Now, this is not to mean that whatever the developer wants, he gets. But if you put restrictions on the size and you find out it's no longer feasible, then there's no project at all. And the affordable housing isn't provided. So what is the specifics in terms of this correspondence? What in the law triggers our need to make these comments to the Division of Housing Development? And if we don't make comments, what's the implication here? Because the one thing we clearly want to do is remain actively engaged in the dialogue with the developer so that we maximize the value of the project to the new residents and to the community as a whole. So can someone sort of share with us what is the process point we're at right now?
I believe that this letter will go to the state, and then it will be all mitigated through the zoning board. It's in their hands now. They're actually the decider. And Mike, if you can correct me if I'm mistaken here, it's the zoning board that will oversee this and make the final decision. And then the developer still has the right with its Total B to have the state represent him, and with the mitigation of the state. I believe there's a three-party arbitrator, not an arbitrator, but I believe there's somebody from the state will handle all these decisions with the zoning board and the developer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is my understanding. I think the general purpose of letters such as this, which the DHCD gives the local municipalities the authority to send in such a letter, is to provide comments to them as part of the overall process for a 40B or a LIP project. And then it's really to go on record that the town, this is the town's view on the project. It's the concerns, and the DHCD uses this down the road if there's any issues, or they're brought in to really help to resolve any issues to bring this project to fruition. But the Zoning Board of Appeals, it is really in their hands at this point, and the state would get involved if we were at a deadlock at some point down the road. But it's really the opportunity for the town to put its 2 cents forward as part of this process at this time. And Bob, I don't know if we have any other comments on that.
Mr. Chairman, one aspect of this also is that this letter going to DHCD is also the finance power behind this. I mean, they make the decision as to whether this project gets financed favorably, and that's what helps, of course, makes the developers' bottom line work. So, to get back to Mr. Germain's question about, making this if we reduce the number of units, does it make the project financially feasible? So perhaps what we're looking towards maybe is telling the state that we are concerned about a number of issues, and maybe not saying to them, well, we think you should have this many units, because we really can't say. I mean, nobody can say how many units the water capacity is all about. But if we're going to ZBA, I imagine the ZBA very often calls for a peer review, and I'm wondering if we can't say in the final paragraph of this letter that one of our concerns here is safety, of course, and water and sewer, and that we would while we still approve this, we're still looking at a peer review for the water and sewer, just to assure everybody that it can indeed meet the capacity.
Is there a deadline for this?
The deadline, well, we've got until the end of the month.
End of January.
End of January.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Germain.
I do have a question. I hear that this letter is going to the state and is drafted as coming from the town. At least the select board, haven't really given any input to concurring with what's in this letter, or not concurring, as the case may be. So a letter like this goes from who represents the town in this case, and who should in fact be involved in the final draft of a letter such as this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, that is exactly the reason why we're here this evening discussing this with the board. Ultimately, the board represents the town, so whatever message the board wants to send to the state in regards to this project, it's really in your hands. Certainly, you've gotten the thoughts and recommendations of the professional staff here in regards to their concerns and their thoughts, but ultimately it's in the board's hands to determine what message you want to send to the state in regards to this project.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Clarification, but I mean, again, Mr. Weiss and brought this forward for the board to consider. So I believe, in my view, unless I can be convinced otherwise, that this correspondence should come from the board. Our team here is trying to give us some thoughts so that we can put it together, and then they're also helping us with the fact that because of the deadline, the timing, and quite frankly, the requirements of open meeting law, we can't meet together to edit things. So I think we need as a board to be in a position to approve whatever we're going to do on our next meeting and get in a timely fashion. And I suggest that that board members provide Mr. Weiss with some bullets or something that we'd like to see in terms of how we'd like to see this thing actually produced. Ask him to put them together, working with the town administrator and Mr. McKay, so that something can be provided to the board that we can actively consider at our next meeting. If that makes sense to folks. I mean, we're trying to honor the requirements of the rules, but also to see that we think there's some real things we'd like to see changed here. Is that fair?
And I think we can do that by the end of the month.
Yeah, I don't want to miss the opportunity to weigh in. That's important.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, could I offer some thoughts? Dan Merrick.
American, go ahead.
Thank you. I just hung around when I saw this on the agenda. I guess what I would suggest to you is that the tone of this letter is very negative and nothing consistent with, the board supporting the LIP project. So let me offer some thoughts on the major topics that were issued here, that were raised here. With respect to the number of units, the size of the project is important. I would remind the board that you guys get credit for every single one of these units on your rolls because it is an apartment rental project. So if you reduce the number of units, the town gets fewer units on their affordable housing rolls. It also significantly reduces the ability of the applicant to engage in some of these other activities, mitigation activities that the town's talking about. And I'm not sure, quite honestly, that you reduce the number of units, any of these issues go away. So what is the point to reducing the number of units? I guess I would say in a letter like this that the town has expressed concerns about traffic impacts and traffic flows in the area. The applicant has committed to commission a traffic study and to implement whatever reasonable improvements are recommended, such as crosswalks, signage, and warning lights, which the applicant has agreed to do. So I think if you made that statement, that would be very consistent with our discussions. With respect to water and sewer, the applicant has committed to paying your normal connection fees for water and sewer. And the applicant has, even though the Woodlands project is going to rebuild that lift station, the applicant has committed to work with the town to ensure that the project will not adversely impact the operation and capacity of the lift station at Dover Road. I think that's an accurate statement. With respect to water, it was our conclusion that, trying to loop a water main is cost prohibitive for this development to undertake on its own, but I think the applicant would be willing to make a donation in addition to all the other things that they're talking about to help the town ultimately loop that water main. And I think those are the major topics that, that the applicant has agreed to work with the town on. So it would be our hope on behalf of the applicant that the tone of this letter could be more positive and more reflective of the spirit of cooperation that the applicant has is looking to work with the town to move this project forward.
Thank you. I think I agree with that. Comments from my colleagues, is that and reflect what we think we ought to do in terms of making some adjustments to this correspondence?
I think, Mr. Chairman, Mr. American just summarized many of the concerns I have, and
I'd be happy to put that in an email to the town administrator tomorrow if you'd like.
Okay.
We'd be happy to receive it, actually.
Okay.
But I think it's important that we clarify these issues such as they are, but in a positive tone without in any way misrepresenting concerns that we have. And that means, obviously, whatever rewriting has to take place should be done in conjunction with people in town who have intimate knowledge, such as Mr. McKay, of some of the issues. But I do believe that, yes, we should be able to make this in preparation for our next meeting so that we get out by the end of the month. And I fully concur with what you said, Mr. Chairman, that we need to weigh in on this to the state by the end of the month. It's our opportunity to do so, and we should take that opportunity.
Okay. Ms. Underhill, you agree?
I agree, yes.
Okay, so that's where we're going to go with this. Thank you, Mr. Weiss and Mr. McKay and Mr. Gazinski. Let's see if we can do a little bit more work and get this in shape so that we can send it off to the Commonwealth by the end of the month. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Empower Millis Electrical Aggregation Update. This is from Mr. Weiss.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert Weiss, now Energy Manager. First, I'd like to thank the board for its support of the Millis Energy Committee's 5-year effort to promote clean their energy supply to Millis's energy ratepayers. Millis's Empire Millis campaign will deliver energy supplies to its subscribers at 10.634 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity. Currently, the basic Eversource rate is 11.88 cents per kilowatt hour. By comparison, the Empower Millis rate includes an extra 5% of renewable energy in its supply. So, final statistics, which I was asked for last month, there are 3,921 Eversource electric customers in Millis, both residential and business. And the campaign mailed out 3,243 packages and reply cards to eligible customers. Those are customers who don't already have third-party supply. 2,811 enrolled in the program, while 432 opted out. That's 15% of the 3,200 packages that went out opted out, which I thought was higher than I thought it was going to be. And if you excuse my math here, if 2,811 customers each used 8,000 kilowatt hours a year, that's a potential savings of $281,000 saved each year over the town. And that is with 5% renewables over the renewable portfolio standard. As we move forward, I hope I can report further savings on occasion, not only in dollars, but also in carbon emissions and greenhouse gases saved. Some people, by the way, signed up for 50% renewables, and at least one person I know signed up for 100% renewables. So we gave people a choice, and some people went with the higher choices. Our consultant, Good Energy, tells us that they're expecting to get data from the supplier, which is Constellation New Energy, and it will be imported into a portal that we can all access to see the status of the programs that will have enrollment numbers along with kilowatt hours and renewable and overall energy use. So that will happen towards the end of the first quarter. So thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that folks in town have done and for everybody's support.
Thank you very much. Just one quick question on new construction. How does that work when a new house goes online?
When there is a new account, they will be sent a package and asked if they wish to participate in the program. We get that information from Eversource, so as soon as Eversource gets a new account, if that account doesn't automatically sign up for another third-party supplier, they will get a mailing themselves.
Okay, so there's an active recruitment, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Germain, yes, sorry.
That's okay. Just a quick question. Mr. Weiss, do you happen to know what the cost per kilowatt hour is for 50% and 100% renewable?
Not off the top of my head. It's a few cents. It is a few cents more. I think somewhere around 12 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the town administrator's evaluation process. Mr. Gazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did put in your packet some documents in relation to this. If the board remembers, back in September, we did have a discussion about the process for the evaluation, annual evaluation, as well as the goal setting. And as part of that, I'm sending you notification in regards to that annual exercise that's been established. And again, in your package, I placed the evaluation form as was utilized last year for that, for the annual evaluation. And unless there's any changes that the board would like to make, that process consists of the board members completing the evaluation forms, submitting them to town council for compilation into a final composite evaluation, which the board will ultimately review with me at a regular meeting. But again, as part of that process, also it provides the opportunity for individual board members to meet with me to review the annual evaluation. And then at the conclusion of that process, which hopefully would conclude by the end of February, we begin work on establishing jointly goals for calendar year 21, with the hopes that that will be concluded by the end of March. So I don't know if there's any questions that the board members may have, or any thoughts in regards to the annual evaluation form.
I'll kick off the conversation. Yes, I mean, I think we had spent a lot of time as the board the last year and a half coming up with a evaluation process and evaluation form, which is intended to be as close as to self-explanatory as it can be. So I think that certainly two of the members have been through this at least once before. The third member has not. But I do think that trying to keep on a schedule is going to be helpful because we didn't do as last year was the first year, so we had to review the town administrative performance over a period beyond a year. So this is an attempt to try and get on track, to utilize the process, and I think that it's certainly something that we can move forward with at this point and try to live up to the deadline, which basically is board members considering the information and doing some work in February to try and compile this material and move forward with it. I've had correspondence with town council. Last time town council played the role of accumulating the information from each board member and then compiling it so that it can be fed back to a town administrator and the members of the board. The reason for that, doing it that way, is to comply with open meeting law requirements, because the board is not having the opportunity. The board members cannot deliberate over this without doing it in public. So this process allows us to do individual meetings with the town administrator, create the material that from our own view, have it consolidated by a third party so that it can be presented in a public meeting with the town administrator, which would reflect then the consensus view of the members of the board. Town council is available for any member of the board who would like to work with her to get a little bit more background, if that's required. That's Kate Federoff. So I think that I appreciate you bringing this forward in a timely manner so that we can be on schedule and get this done on time. So questions from the board members? Comments, thoughts?
No, Mr. Chair, I think last year's experience says it takes some time to do this appropriately. I don't care how anybody looks at it. A good evaluation takes time. So I just suggest to all of us that this is not something that just happens. It's a complicated process, but one that I think, and I think we've proven, is very necessary for the town and for ourselves.
Yes, thank you. I agree. It's thoughtful commenters is what makes not only the performance review of past performance relevant, but it also leads then to areas for improvement in subsequent years, which is what the process is supposed to address. We also have a component of the review ultimately, which relates to a compensation-related evaluation, since there's compensation at risk here. I've asked the town council to help us work through that as well as a separate topic. But at this point, we're looking primarily at the performance review. With the compensation review, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gazinski, the compensation review is actually effective July 1, right?
That's correct. Any change would be effective July 1st of 2021.
So there is a contractual component which would go into effect in July 1st, but there's also a performance-related component that this board will have to make a determination on by July 1st. They're related, but they're separate tasks. So any other comments, questions? Is the board okay with the timetable that the town administrator has laid out so eloquently in pen by putting a 1 inside the 0?
Trying to conserve paper, Mr. Chairman.
Apparently. I thought the first one was just trying to get rid of it, but now I realize that they were 1s rather than 0s.
I do have a question, actually.
Sure.
So in putting this together, I don't know if maybe I'm missing something from when I looked at it, but is there a document that shows the goals and expectations from last review to evaluate as whether they've been met for this one?
I think it's not quite as clean as that. I think what is that if the town administrator could circulate the results of the review from last time, so you could see the outcome, you could all see it again,
Okay.
as well as the areas of improvement, that we would be in a better position to evaluate what's happened year over year. I mean, generally the goals are covered in general by the categories they're intended to be, but it's not as crisp as we'd like it to be. And I do think it's important to evaluate not only with respect to the goals that are inherent in the job performed by the town administrator, but how the town administrator has assisted in the board's efforts to accomplish our goals. So what's related here, again, the period of review is the calendar year 2020. So the board had goals in 2020. Those goals were incorporated into what we're asking the town administrator to support. The review then, which covered the prior year, shows not how we evaluated his performance for the prior year and also the areas where we sought him to improve. So if you could circulate the prior year, Mike, that would be helpful, as well as the draft of the prior year's goals. So we'd all have them. That would help us frame the issue.
Thank you.
So thank you for getting us going. I agree with Mr. Germain that we need to be thoughtful and careful, and as questions come up, certainly we can run them by town council, who has, quite a bit of experience with this process with us and some wisdom to share. So there is a resource that we relied on quite a bit last time, who is, I'm sure, available to help us this time as well. Okay. As I was saying, until I forgot what I was saying, we are trying to get this done by the end of February in terms of the evaluation, and that would make it on time. If we slip a little bit so that we can reflect the high quality of the work, that's fine. What we're trying to do is avoid doing it in, April or May. That would not be a good outcome. Okay. Relates to this subject of performance, at some point I would also like to ask the town administrator to present to the board process he would intend to go through in evaluating the performance of the department heads that report to him. So that's something I'd like to see us get some more documentation on. particular importance, the performance evaluation of the finance director. Not because it's any more important a position, but the way the situation occurs is that even though the finance director's day-to-day activities are directed by the town administrator, the finance director actually is an employee of the select board. So I would, it's important for the town administrator to conduct this review. It's also important for the town administrator to actively engage and seek the input from the members of the board to incorporate into that review. So I would like to see you come back to us, Mr. Gazinski, with your plan for performance appraisal for department heads. And I'm not trying to single out the finance director. It's just that the reporting structure is slightly different for the finance director than it is for the other department heads. And there's a reason for it, which is inherent in the state law, which is looking to make sure that the finance director has a certain level of independence from the administrator's role. So anyway.
Very good. I will work on that and get back to the board on with some documentation about that approach and a schedule for completing that work.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda, there's two items that we move to this day on, which are applications for amendments and or licenses.
Okay.
So the first is change.
It's a change of DBA.
Lumpies.
Yes, so when Chiara LLC purchased Lumpy's Liquors, they originally kept the name of Lumpy's Liquors. When they came to the board for approval of their liquor license, they have since changed the name to One Stop Liquors, which was actually about a year ago. And although we approved that as a town through the town clerk's office, there was no official approval with the ABCC, the Alcoholic Beverages and Control Commission. And we just realized that when they came for their renewal for this year for their liquor license. So this is just a formal, the board just needs to formally vote that they are okay with the change of DBA. So it will be Chiara LLC, DBA One Stop Liquors. They did present all the information that they needed to present, and then there's no cost associated with it. I just forwarded on to the ABCC.
Okay, so
it's kind of just
I need a motion
crossing the T's.
to make the change.
I move that we approve the application for amendment for the change of DBA to One Stop Liquors from Lumpy's.
Second.
So moved and seconded to approve the name change from to Chiara from Lumpy's Liquors. I guess it's doing business as One Stop Liquor.
Correct.
Okay. So I will poll the board on that motion. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously. Now common vic.
The common vitular is just simply because Nirvana was inadvertently left off of the list when you did all of the renewals recently. They are such a new business that we just completely forgot until I went to get a sandwich there the other day. So this is just simply the renewal of the common vitular license. They've already submitted their $50 and are good to go. Everything else has been provided.
So I make a motion that we renew the common vicular license for Nirvana.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
And execute these two licenses, maybe not the first one, but the second one?
Nirvana, you'll have to sign. You don't have to sign anything for the change of DBA, but Nirvana, I will print out the licenses for you to sign next time you're in.
Okay. Next item we have is the water sewer commitment. Mr. Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet is the water and sewer department's commitment to the collector for the month of December. in the amount of $10,911.61 and requesting the approval of the board for that commitment.
I'll second that.
We have to make the motion.
I'll move what he just said, which is-
Mr. Kuzinski can't make the
Well, hey,
motion.
look, I'll move that the water sewer commitment for December 2020 in the amount of $10,911.61 be approved.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the water sewer commitment for December of 2020 in the amount of $10,911.61. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next time on our agenda will be the board convening an executive session, concluding the open meeting, going into executive session, emerging from executive session for the purposes of adjourning the meeting. The executive session would be to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union and union personnel, specifically collective bargaining agreement with SEIU and employment agreement with the library director, and also to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate. In this case, a Chapter 61A parcel on Village Street. So I will pull the board for going into executive session. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Mrs. Underhill?
Yes.
That motion is carried unanimously. We will now leave this open session and go into executive session. We have a separate item, right?
Yes, you do. And for some reason, the original executive session meeting I set up was no longer showing up in my Zoom, so I quickly created another one and sent you an email directly before this meeting. So the very last email you got from me should have the correct Zoom link.
At 6:27 p.m.
That's the one.
Okay.
I don't know where the other one went to, but it wasn't, I couldn't find it.
Well, maybe it's the Russians. Who knows?
I think it is.
All right. So I will see everybody on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aye.